Welcome back to the Law News Network. I'm your host, Beth Karras, and I am joined in the studio by Michel Bryant, a criminal defense attorney and also my former colleague at Court TV. We've been listening for the past, since I've been sitting here an hour and 15 minutes to this accident reconstruction expert, Ohio State trooper, who just finished his direct examination, and some interesting things came out on his testimony. The cross-examination, by the way, has just begun, and there was already a sidebar because there was a question about, did you check the driver's license? And he said, no, I didn't. That wasn't part of his reconstruction, and it wouldn't be. Whether or not Joshua Gaspar was licensed or had a suspension isn't really relevant to exactly how this crash occurred. In any event, a few things jumped out during this this testimony.
Well, I mean, first of all, it is in such minutia, such detail that this guy is going over what happened. And obviously the most riveting stuff is the visual evidence from the cameras on the trooper's car. We only saw a part of it, and I'm sure that's because there were some serious motions in limine pre-trial to keep the actual video out as being far too prejudicial. Very probative, yes, but far too prejudicial because I'm sure it's gruesome. So it seems to me that the balance they struck was, we'll use still images. We don't want those televised, but we'll use still images. At least the jury can see those and understand how.
Which he calls a frame. It's a frame.
Yes, that's right. It's a 30-frame second, which is pretty typical for video recording, 30 frames per second. And so they got to see frame by frame how this accident set up, how it unfolded, and what it did to Trooper Velez. And
because he was going frame by frame, they were within it took him several minutes to describe 1 second.
Yes.
Because I thought they had moved from 1244 to 1245, and I was writing notes about that, and then it's like, no, they were still in 1244.
Yes, 44-1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, yeah. And the whole thing unfolded over a little less than 4 seconds. So
right, 3.9 seconds. So what
I'm no math major, that's 120 frames. That's a lot of detail.
Right. So what we're talking about is a 189-foot skid from start to finish, and impact was how many feet in? 30-something feet in?
Yes, they had 53 feet.
53 feet in was impact with Trooper Velez. At the time of the impact, he calculated the speed of Joshua Gaspar's car to be 62 to 65 miles per hour.
Correct. In a speed limit that was 60 at the time.
And posted 60. The DA was, you asked him a couple of follow-up questions just before the direct ended, saying, okay, so by the time the skid marks show up, you're actually going a little bit more slowly than, that's not the speed you're traveling, right? Because you're braking, and then the skid marks start. Can't be definite about that, though.
No, and what's really muddied the waters these days with these accident reconstructionists is anti-lock brakes, because they aren't anti-skid brakes. They're anti-lock brakes. And back in the good old days, you lock up the brakes, they start skidding. Everything's very consistent because it's locked up and you are skidding, and they can factor in that skid friction. Well, now, anti-lock brakes pulse. If you've ever had to try and lean on your anti-lock brakes and they don't lock up, they pulse. And so the skid they leave is a little more like a hash mark almost, just like a dash. And it has to make the calculation far less precise.
Is that is that the kind of brakes they had here?
Yes, and I mean virtually every car in the last 20 years or more has had anti-lock brakes. Yeah.
Okay, so anti-lock brakes. He said he couldn't really calculate the speed just before the skid starts, and I know the district attorney wants it to be as high as possible because their position is he was speeding, and that's part of one of the
Sure. Impaired or otherwise. Yes.
Right, impaired or otherwise. It can't be. Yeah, you can be violating different traffic rules, and you cause an accident or a death, and the sentence may be different, but you're still committing a vehicular homicide if you run a red light or a stop sign, or you're speeding and crashes occur. So there are different theories here, not just impaired. But we were under the impression that the state's position, it was much faster. He was going much faster.
And I don't see that evidence. I don't see it. I mean, nothing convinces me that it was greater than 65.94, I think was the top end of his range.
And with a speed limit of 60, I mean,
that's not outrageous. Let's face it. I just drove from California to New York over the last 3 days.
Now, why
I
would
went
you
right
do that?
through this area.
Well, you
well,
did?
That's a whole different story.
Okay.
But everybody should do it at least once. Drive across this tremendous country. It's just vast. So I'm driving right through there the day before yesterday. I wasn't on I-90. I think they're I-90 and 91. I was on 76, but the fact is there are tons of roadways along there that are packed with cars, all of them with 60, 65, 70, 75 mile an hour speed limits. I mean, you know, since way back in the 70s when they cut us back to 55 to save gas, not anymore. Utah, it's 80 miles an hour. So we have some very high speed limits out there, and this is not in a remote area. This is, I think, just south of Cleveland, very near Cleveland. 60 is, you know, pretty good speed.
So, but when you get a speeding ticket, you usually don't get a speeding ticket for like a couple miles over.
Don't.
And it's considered reckless if you're 15 miles an hour over the posted limit or more, right?
Yes.
That could be, that's reckless.
Yes.
But here you're looking at, I mean, at the high end, 62 to 65 at time of
10%
when
over,
the skids start.
Yeah. I mean, I use the 10% rule myself.
Not even a ticketable offense.
I mean, you're probably not going to bother an officer to pull you over if you're 10% within the posted speed limit. They're probably not going to bother you. So it doesn't help the prosecution.
That's all that's been going on this morning in this case is the accident reconstruction expert, a trooper who, by the way, at one point, you know, the camera was on his torso because of the graphic images apparently of, you know, the actual crash and the striking of Officer Velez being caught on camera. So he was breaking that down for the jury. But we did get a shot of Gaspar, and you could see.
Not a pleasant time. No, and even when we did get a glimpse of his eyes after it was done, they looked a little misty, like maybe he had, you know, been kind of emotional about it. And you can imagine. I don't care how it happened or why. Nobody sitting in a driver's seat wants that to unfold in front of them. It's frightening.
You know, maybe we're trying to find out whether or not we are in a lunch break now in Gaspar. It's 12:23 here on the East Coast. And I think maybe we should go back. Let's go back into Gaspar because I think the court may still be in session. Otherwise, we are following the case of Segura, the quadruple murder of Segura and Henry Segura in Leon County, Florida. That's in Tallahassee. But we're going to go back into Gaspar for the continued cross-examination of this crime scene reconstruction expert.